This is the first mini screencast on Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and we are going to, I'm going to break it down in several smaller screencasts as you're reading. I think that's probably a little bit better. It helps you keep on track a little bit more and understanding the novel as you go instead of just a series of really long screencasts all the way through. So I want to talk about chapters 1 through 4 first today. I want to talk about this first sentence here because it really kind of sets the entire plot into motion. And it's also one of the most famous first lines in all of literature. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. So we know from this first chapter that a very wealthy young man has moved in next door to the Bennet family, and this event really sets the wheels in motion of the plot of the novel, and it really kind of gives the reader a glimpse of the story as a whole, which is that the pursuit of single men in possession of good fortune by the various women that we have here in the book. And I talked a little bit about the advantages of marriage and the importance of marriage really and social standing in another screencast, and we talked about money in another screencast. And so this kind of really pulls it together. You know, these women, they were preoccupied with socially advantageous marriages in 19th century England, and we discussed the reasons for that, you know, especially for this family in particular, because they have no living brother, no male heir. The estate does not pass to the females in the house, so they would be in really dire circumstances after their father passed if they did not find an advantageous marriage to give them a stable future. So I love this idea here because it's sarcastic, it's kind of biting. She's saying that a single man in possession of a large fortune must be in want of a wife, but really she's kind of revealing that the reverse is also true. A single woman with limited prospects is in perhaps desperate want of a husband. And so the Bennet girls they're all in a flutter over the arrival of this guy and the news of his fortune, because there is a chance that a prospective marriage match can be made. So we meet the Bennet family in this opening chapter. We have Mr. Bennet, who the text tells us is a mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humor, and reserve. And caprice, which is like prone to sudden changes in behavior. And then his wife, who is a woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper, i.e. this woman can get really hysterical at times. She acts poorly in social situations. She runs her mouth entirely too much, and it gets her in a lot of trouble, as we're going to see as we go along in the story. And there are 5 daughters: Jane, Elizabeth, Jane's the oldest, Elizabeth, Mary, Lydia, and Kitty. And so once they learn that Charles Bingley has moved into the neighborhood, almost immediately Miss Bennet latches onto a plan to make the most of this opportunity to throw him together with one of her daughters. And the important context of this first chapter especially is something that you probably need to understand as well. So Miss Bennet spends like several pages trying to convince Mr. Bennet to go and visit Mr. Bingley, because if he does not, the girls would not have the opportunity to meet him. You know, back in that time, a woman could not just walk up to a man that she was interested in and introduce herself. It was considered improper. And so an introduction by a male, an older male, an established male, would need to be in place before that could happen. So if Mr. Bingley Mr. Bennet did not go and introduce himself to Mr. Bingley ahead of time, then the girls may never have the opportunity to meet. And we see that, you know, she's kind of really needy and grating on everybody's nerves and wants him to go and visit, and he's refusing to do so. But he really secretly has gone and met him already so that he can give that, because he's not a fool. Like, he wants to give those opportunities to his children. Okay, a little later in that first section, there's going to be a ball at Meryton. which is the closest nearby, let's just call it like a city, okay? It's a town where, people come together. It's probably a lot like it's very rural where the families live, and so they can walk to the city if they need to buy things or purchase grocery, like going into town for Walmart and to the that kind of thing. It is this ball that brings the two couples that are central to the plot together. So that would be Bingley and Jane, and then Darcy and Elizabeth. And it's the first time that we see them together in the story. And Austen's original title for this novel was First Impressions, which I think is very apt because it is these first impressions at the ball that initiate the contrast between the two couples. So here we have Jane and Bingley. They're attracted to each other. Immediately, their interaction is relatively effortless. They dance twice at the ball, which pleases Mrs. Bennet to no end. And they have such easygoing natures that it's going to make quick work of forming a solid match between the two of them. And to be honest, that match is going to remain solid and strong all the way throughout the course of the novel. It's not their love that's ever going to be in question. It's going to be the situations around their joining that is going to be the issue. So on the other hand, we have this interaction with Darcy. He comes in, he's very proud, he's very arrogant, he's refusing to dance with anybody, and almost immediately everybody takes a dislike to him because of his behavior. So Bingley and Darcy are having a conversation. They are unaware that Elizabeth is within hearing range. She's not eavesdropping. They're just talking loud enough and she's close by, but they are unaware that she is there. And Bingley is going on and on about how Jane is the most beautiful creature he's ever seen. But he says, bro, you should really dance with her sister because she's very agreeable as well. And Darcy refuses, and he says, and I quote, "She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me." Then, to add insult to injury, he remarks that he has no interest in women who are slighted by other men, meaning that since Elizabeth was sitting down without a partner for the dance, that meant she was some kind of unwanted cast-off or social pariah, which is definitely not the case. There just happened to be more women than men at the ball. And so she hears that, obviously, which, nobody wants to hear that about themselves. And so immediately that snub of her creates a mutual dislike between the two, like instantly. And then he also has that the neighborhood is kind of against him as well because of that same behavior. So at the end of the evening, the Bennets have returned home. Mrs. Bennet is like recapping the evening. And Mr. Bennet tells her to hush because he's tired of listening to it. And Jane is recapping everything that happened at the dance. She's really surprised that Bingley has danced with her twice. And Elizabeth tells her, you just really don't have any idea how beautiful you really are. They recap the situation with Mr. Darcy, and that brings that first section, chapters 1 through 4, to a close. I wanted to point out one more thing really quick before we continue on, that in this book, there's little physical description of the characters. There is a very, very, very little physical description. So our perception of them largely comes from the words and what they say. And so you need to keep that in your mind as we go along, that these people's characters, their people's impressions of them are largely coming from how they speak, what they say, and their behavior when they're in public. And so that's going to be really important as we move forward, and we'll pick up next time with the next section.